Hi all. In this short video, we will be demonstrating the process of integrating the inventory replenishment process as part of the supply and demand planning flow using SnapLogic. I'm Goce Mirchevsky, SnapLogic integration consultant at Interworks. I have with me my colleague Jovan Jovanovski, who will be demonstrating and guiding through the implementation process. Interworks is a trustworthy integration consultancy that enables global growth-oriented companies to execute efficiently. We optimize the processes and human capital for our customers and empower them to consistently outsmart their competition. We are implementation and training partners of SnapLogic since 2015.
Thank you, Goce. Hi all. Let's start with the diagram and the explanation for the high-level architecture of the business process. So for the inventory replenishment integration, we have a scheduled pipeline in SnapLogic which takes the SKU forecasts, applies approval rules to each SKU forecast, and then processes only the approved orders. So the ones that are not approved are filtered out, and then the delivery address is assigned to the order. So once we have this information in place, we group the data by vendor and then submit the orders to each vendor. The vendor then takes these orders, plans the delivery and the shipper, and ships them via the selected carrier. So this is the process on high level, and now let's jump into SnapLogic and build the actual pipelines for this process. So going inside SnapLogic, we start by first adding a pipeline for the inventory replenishment process. We specify the name in the label and save the settings. Inside of the pipeline, we will start by adding a file reader snap that will be used to read the SKU forecasts. Once we read the SKU forecasts, we need to parse the data, so from binary to document format, or that's JSON in SnapLogic. So we use the XML parser, and once we parse the data, we then use the JSON splitter snap, so we can basically split the data per each SKU forecast. So then we can apply the transformations for all the SKU forecasts.
So Jovan, I have a question here. I see that you're selecting the snaps from that menu on the bottom. Can you please shortly explain about that?
Yeah, so that is basically the iris scanner that we are using. So that's the SnapLogic integration assistant, which has multiple features, but most important are the suggestion of the snaps and pipeline suggestions. So those are the most useful features from SnapLogic's side that we use during the development of the pipelines and also in this demo.
So except, as you said, suggesting only snaps that should probably will be used downstream in the flow, it also suggests pipelines, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So, and we will see that shortly.
Awesome. Okay.
We need to split the data so we can repeat the transformations for each SKU forecast. And then we want to apply some approval rules as we seen in the diagram. For that purpose, we take the pipeline execute snap, and with this snap we can call a child pipeline or a child process. So we will define the label, so that will be apply approval rules, and also specify the name of the pipeline where we will build this logic. So once we define the name of the pipeline, we need to actually create that pipeline. So we specify the name and save the settings so we can create the pipeline. Inside of this pipeline, we need, on the beginning of the pipeline, we need a MySQL select, and on the end of the pipeline, we want to write a file in JSON format. So we take the file reader and JSON formatter. Now we can see the suggested pipelines, or the feature from SnapLogic Iris Scanner that will provide us suggestions for pipelines based on the snaps that we have dragged on the canvas. So as you can see on the bottom of the screen, we have multiple pipeline suggestions, and based on our requirements we can choose the one that fits our needs the best. We select the pipeline and choose replace.
So basically the structure now, it will be built, and the job for the developer will be only to configure and to set mappings, etc.
Yes, that's correct. So the architecture of the pipeline is built by the iris scanner with just minor configurations to the snaps. We can use the pipeline, or we can enable it for usage. So the MySQL select snap would be used so we can select the rules from the table, and once we select those rules, we want to apply them to each SKU. So we make a cross-reference with the SKUs and the rules. Once we define the rules, we want to create the target structure for each order. So we use the mapper snap for that purpose. And once we create the structure, we will create a file for the order report.
Okay, and I see here this file writer actually is like a generic snap, because I see that it can write anywhere that we want, correct?
Yeah, so basically this snap can write to S3 bucket, it can write to some shared location like SFTP,
or maybe Google Drive and etc. So basically what we will set here in the file name, what protocol we will set, it will write to that location.
Yes,
okay,
that's correct. And we can also change the format of the file. So currently we choose to be the JSON format, but it can be any other format that we need.
Yeah.
So going inside of in the parent pipeline, we will need to group all these requests, just so we create a batch and only send one request going forward. And once we group this data, we need to proceed, or the next step is basically to read the prepared orders. So we again use a file reader snap, and what we need to do is we need to connect this snap with the output from the group by snap, and we can do that by enabling the input view to the file reader and just connecting those two snaps together. Once we read the prepared orders, we again need to parse this data. So in this case we use the JSON parser, as we have a JSON document. And once we parse the data, we use the filter snap, and we use the filter snap just so we can extract only the orders that have been previously approved.
So I see here you are using filter snap. I see previously you were using group snap. So these are like predefined snaps that are offered by SnapLogic that will help in building also the logic, instead of writing data like an expression in JavaScript.
Yes. So these snaps are optimized, and there are more than 500 snaps that are pre-developed inside of the SnapLogic platform, which we can use just by dragging them from the palette and placing them on the canvas.
Yeah.
We now use the group by field snap. This snap would be used just so we can group by all the forecasts per each vendor.
Yeah.
So we define the label and we specify the field.
So yeah, so instead of writing some expression, we just put the field that we want to group by.
Yeah, this is one of those snaps that are optimized, and basically we can just specify the field and it will do the work in the background. And once we group the data by each vendor, we need one more sub-process. So we take the pipeline execute snap, we define the name, and this will be process where we will submit the orders to the actual vendors. So we specify the name of the pipeline, and now we will go inside and create that pipeline. So inside of this pipeline, we will make minor transformations to the data. So we want to split the data. We want to save it in JSON format, and then that JSON format would be submitted to the vendor using an email. So we use the email sender snap, which we can configure that it will send emails to each vendor.
So these are also predefined snaps for sending in emails as well.
Yes. So we save the settings, and at this point we have all the data, or we have the full pipeline transformed and developed as per our needs.
So, Joanna, also one more point that I would like to emphasize here is that I see that you have put meaningful names for each of the snaps. Besides, that is a good development practice. Can you please explain one more thing? What is the advantage having these snaps in named manner?
Yeah. So basically, the naming convention has multiple good points. So one of them is so SnapLogic offers to generate a documentation for the pipeline, and if we have the labels of the snaps defined, when it creates the documentation, it will be a lot more meaningful. And also the next
and easily for the business personnel to understand what is the logic in the pipeline. So basically, not this only actual implementation. This can be used as a diagram as well to explain to someone what is the business problem that we are solving here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct. And it's also useful while debugging the pipeline if there are any issues.
Yeah, definitely.
So at this point, we are going to validate the pipeline. And with the validate option, we can see the preview data after each snap. So going in the circle after the snap, we can see the data at that point of time. So we can see the format. And after the repeats each SKU forecast snap, we can see that we have multiple rows for each SKU number. If we look the data preview in the second branch, where we have the data structured, we can see that we have those SKUs with the approval status that we have applied previously. The next step was to assign the delivery address, and if we see the preview data after that, we can see that at the bottom there is an address that we have assigned in that child pipeline. So because the validation was successful, we can now proceed to a manual execution of the pipeline. So the manual execution is just one of the options that we can use to execute the pipeline, but there are multiple options that we can choose how do we want this pipeline to be executed, and that can be done going inside of the create task window, where we can see all those options. So we have a triggered option, we have scheduled and ultra. The triggered option will basically expose this pipeline as a REST API that can be later triggered from any REST client like Postman or anything else. The next option is the scheduled option, where we can basically set the timings when we would want this pipeline to be executed. We can choose the repeat option, and it will basically run on some specified frequency, which can be in minutes, daily basis, weekly basis, monthly, and so on. And we can also set the frequency.
So this is the option in our case that we are using, because
Yes.
from the diagram I recall it was scheduled task.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And once the pipeline executed successfully, we can go inside of the dashboard. And have a look at the specifics for the particular execution. So in the pipeline tab, we can locate the pipeline that we have executed and see the time when it started, the duration, the status, and so on. And we can see the details for all of the child processes that we have in the pipeline. So we can also see the executions for each of the child processes.
Yeah, so we have all the pipelines, and the status and the time duration that it took. So this is pretty helpful to see in details what was the execution time. However, also I believe we can have it also inside of each pipeline and see the execution per snap.
Yes.
So we can make furthermore optimizations.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Great.
So this is basically it from the SnapLogic demonstration. Now let's go back to the diagram.
Thank you, Johan. Great.
Going back to the diagram, we can see how from an idea we came to realization in short period of time. We started from the diagram and built the pipeline step by step, taking SKU forecasts, applying approval rules, and all the transformations to the data in fairly straightforward fashion, and then submitting the final orders to each vendor. This was made possible by having the large collection of snaps available, the iOS assistant, and all the other features that SnapLogic has to offer. This was it for this demo. Hope you will find this video helpful for you and your colleagues. If you're interested in more details, feel free to contact us on sales@interworks.com.mk or SnapLogic on snaplogic.com. Thanks for your time and have a good day.